Hi, and welcome to part two of my epic mini-series on why I don't want revival in the Christian church in the UK at the moment. I did say at the end of part one that this part would be on witch hunting. And well, that is coming up, but I realise I need to tackle another topic first. Before you can do witch hunts, you've got to be convinced that there are witches, right? And that is a metaphor, not for actual witches, but for stuff that you want to get rid of, that you believe you want to get rid of. Well, there are things that need getting rid of in church circles, particularly in the context of church being given power and influence. And those are people who attract and cultivate power and influence, and in the wrong way. And so the little interim topic is described by one of the New Testament writers as bitter roots. Okay, so the writer to the Hebrews, the Jewish Christians around the Mediterranean world in the first century, warned them, and he was referring, I think, probably to an Old Testament Hebrew Jewish scripture to say this. He warned them not to let bitter roots become established in the church, because these, again, in this writer's words, cause trouble and defile many. So that's a different sense than we would typically use the word bitter in today. So let's say somebody does something and I am bitter about it. Well, that only hurts me. If you're bitter about something somebody said, for instance, you being bitter doesn't hurt them. It only hurts you. But the bitter root defiles many and causes trouble for many. And that's why it makes much more sense to see that as applying to people who have influence over many. Influential, divisive people who are prevalent in the church. They worm themselves into leadership positions and they conduct themselves in a toxic way. They create toxic church cultures, they bully individuals, they push out and isolate people who stand in their way or disagree with them. It certainly causes trouble, and it certainly defiles many because they make good people in churches do bad things. Interesting, listening to some of the stories that came out of a very populist church congregation in Seattle called Mars Hill. You may well have heard of it. I say influential in the sense that the CEO of that particular business became very famous, sold a lot of books, and made a big name for himself in evangelical Christian circles, at least. But the way he compelled the church to behave, in particular the way he did these particular stories that people were saying from their own lives, the way he ordered husbands to behave towards their wives, left a lot of good husbands having to apologize to their wives for the way they'd behaved, for the way that they'd taken on board this kind of toxic teaching. There are many other kinds of toxic teachings. And that's one important reason why I don't want to see the church, certainly the evangelical church in the Western world today, suddenly being given a massive extra dose of power, wealth and influence, because it's too full of people who know how to siphon off that wealth and influence and use it for themselves and steer many people into following themselves, the divisive leaders. Enriching themselves and empowering themselves further. And the damage that would do to the church and the damage that would do to people coming in bothers me. Okay, so the witch hunts of the Middle Ages were actually chasing an imaginary bogeyman. And the word witch hunt today is a pejorative term. But the church is going to have to deal with some of these toxic individuals, and the problem is that they have taken root. And a bit like a sycamore tree that's self-seeded just this year, you can pick up the wee seedling with thumb and forefinger. That's you. But once that's grown into a tree, then you've got problems digging that up. And it'll take a lot of things with it. And you try and remove an established, divisive leader, he or she, more usually he, will do as much damage as he can on the way out. And before the church is safe to be given revival, she needs to find a way to deal with these people. I use the word witch hunt. It's perhaps not the right metaphor to use. Okay, so in part 3, which will come up tomorrow, I am going to talk about what the church might and might not be well advised to do about these people.